One, good morning, Chris, man. Thank you so much for joining me. It's what time is it now in Park City?
It's 10:30 in the morning, man. Not bad.
Yeah, not too bad. I know you've been up for a while, but what's I know you've been hitting the bike trails, I think a lot out there. What first off, how you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I've got two kids and we're getting back in the swing of school. I'm not a huge fan of school. So we're back in the swing of that and getting the flow of that going on and enjoying the rest of a really short fall here in the mountains because snow is coming soon. I know in South Carolina that probably sounds nuts, but I think it's supposed to snow on Sunday and Monday. So
Dang.
we're getting ready, man.
We
Yeah.
just today today and yesterday felt like the first fall days in South Carolina. It's been
Yeah,
brutally hot.
I bet.
During the summers in Park City, what you hit the trails biking a good bit?
Yeah, we really try to. I love mountain biking. I really like dirt biking. It's a little hard to get out on the dirt bike because it's a bit more time consuming. But I love mountain biking. Especially kind of like enduro or downhill oriented type stuff is just
Yeah,
super
yeah.
fun. And we've got a huge trail system out here, which is great because we can really get out and explore. And we're also in a good location. We get to kind of bounce around throughout sort of like the West Coast. We're only maybe like 4 hours from Sun Valley, Idaho, or 3.5 from Jackson Hole. And then
Yep.
you can go south and go to like Moab or St. George, Virgin. And so we're really fortunate in that we're pretty centrally located. So you can kind of get some really cool weekend trips and get some good exposure to the outdoors.
Yep. I've been to Park City once, and I always thought I was looking into you and your story. I thought you'd be really good friends with my buddy Blair Russian. He lived a ton in Jackson Hole, and then when we were in Park City, he drove down. Now he lives in Oakland. He's always on the trails doing downhill mountain biking. But for you, I want to learn more about your story. So you grew up, I think you were born out there, but you
Yep.
quickly moved to Pennsylvania.
Yeah, so I was born, my parents are from Pennsylvania. They moved out to Utah. My dad had a job opportunity and they had some friends out here. So they moved out to Salt Lake in the 70s and then had my sister and I. And then I think it was like 8 weeks after I was born, they moved back to the East Coast. So I grew up just outside of Philly, but always mountains were kind of always in my heart. As a kid growing up, we would visit out here and I always thought to myself, like, what are we doing living in Pennsylvania? Like, why do we not live in the mountains? So I really wanted to come back, but I grew up wrestling. I really loved wrestling, so I did that for basically from the time I think I was about six up until through I got out of college. Looked at schools out west, but they didn't really have any good wrestling schools that I wanted to go to, so I stayed in Pennsylvania for that. And then as soon as I was done college, I moved out to Park City for my internship, and that was, gosh, 22 years ago. 22 years ago.
What
Wild.
was
Never went home.
before you got into CrossFit, what were you doing?
Oh, like training wise?
Yeah, training wise and career wise.
Oh gosh, I was a ski bum. Like I fully like I went I was in college. Really, I just wanted to wrestle. I grew up doing that and I just really wanted to try wrestling Division 1. So I went to a little school called Lock Haven, which was really cool because I got a chance to wrestle D1, but go to a smaller school. And then when I was done, I took my major was commercial recreation, which is very broad. And when I got out of school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do at all.
Hmm.
And I just ski bummed it in Park City. I was working in ski shops as like a ski tech, repairing skis, ran the repair shop for a little while at a shop. I would work in the bike shop in the summers and wrench on bikes. And then I did a little bit of personal training, tried to get my feet under me there, but was just at a Globo gym type place here. And it just wasn't a good fit for me. Um, and so I really did that for probably 5 years, as far as like, work and just a
Hmm.
hodgepodge of things in a ski town, random jobs, barely making any money. And then training wise, I was sort of all over the place. Right out of college, I went back to more of your traditional, lifting 3 to 4 days a week and running and riding bikes the other time. So it was really traditional lifting, a little bit of what I guess some people would call like the West Side or conjugate system, tinkering with a little bit of that. and then riding my bike. And then I stumbled into CrossFit in 2006. And that
Yeah,
was
how'd
kind
you
of,
stumble in?
oh, a buddy of mine. So I did Young Life. Young Life is a really cool, it's a
Yep.
non-denominational Christian outreach to high school kids. Really cool organization. I grew up in it. And then I was a leader here in Park City. And one of the kids that we worked with ended up graduating, going into the military. And we went on a weekend trip and bumped into him. He stopped by to say hi. And he at the time was enlisted in the Marines and doing some stuff there in Pendleton, I think. And we bumped into him and he said, "Hey man, you got to check out this thing called CrossFit. I think you'd really love it." And I kind of forgot about it. And then a couple weeks later, did a search and it popped up and I saw a workout and I was like, "Oh, I'll try this." And yeah, never stopped.
And but this is when did it cross? I mean, this is like very early on in CrossFit, 2006 or so. What
Yeah.
was CrossFit like when you Googled CrossFit? I mean, Google's kind of just was blowing up on the scene then too. Like, was
Yeah.
there, ample amounts of information about it? Did you have a local
No.
gym?
No. Well, I think we were the first affiliate in Utah. And so really it was us just working out in like the Globo gym. And you go to CrossFit.com and it was just a blog post, really. It's just this big rolling blog post. They would post a workout and comments, and that was really it. There was no direction on what or how to do. They started to kind of get into posting these videos where they would have athletes like either do the workout or maybe do an example of some of the movements or something. Some pictures of these seminar type things that they used to do. But it was really Wild West, man. Like
Hmm.
really, really underground back then, really underground.
What was it like for you? When did it click? You're like, all right, I'm gonna pursue this in a competitive way.
Oh, that's a great question. I don't think anyone's asked me that. I kind of stumbled into it, at like right place, right time. I started in the fall of 2006 and I was just looking at these comments on the blog post and I remember thinking like, oh, yeah, I'm like, this feels more like sport than it does working out. I'm kind of good at it. And then they posted on one of their blog posts, July CrossFit Games 2007. I was like, oh, that'd be cool. And so I flew out and I went to it. And then it just sort of I grew with it.
Hmm.
It wasn't huge. It was small, really community oriented. I mean, we literally had a barbecue at the end of the day on Friday after a
Boys, it
workout.
changed a little bit.
Yeah. And like we all just hung out and kind of shared, training stories and where we're from and gyms, if people owned them, what they were like. Uh, and it was really special, man. I'm super grateful for that experience, but I just grew with it. And
Hmm.
so I showed up the next year and the next year, and it just got more and more serious and training volume and locations and workouts and sponsors. And that yeah, I just kind of was a part of the hood ornament on the freight train.
Was there a qualifying then?
Not in 2007 and 8. Those, I
I
don't
saw on
even,
your stats, like I think it was your third year, you placed in like regionals or something.
yeah, I want to say like in 2009 or 2009 or 10, they started to have sort of these, like, I think it was 2009 was the first year they had kind of these regional qualifier type
Hmm.
things. But 2007 and 8, you could just show up, just be like, hey, I signed my name on the dotted line. Let's go. But I think 2009 was the first year that they had a qualifier.
With with you, I've heard you say like at some point in your life you were like consumed with it. You were all in about
Yeah.
it. What years were that?
Probably from the time 2010, like it was a big shift because it went to the StubHub Center at LA. And even though it was really, really small attended, that not a ton of people were there,
Hmm.
you could just tell it was like, okay, we've gone from
Momentum.
this
Yeah.
ranch to like a stadium. And then 2011 is when you saw way more influx, right? Reebok got involved and more and more. And that 2011 to 14, I think it was pretty definitely 12 through 14. It was, yeah, it was what I did for
Hmm.
sure. Everything else was kind of on the back burner with running the gym, teaching seminars at those times. I did all that stuff, but the primary focus was training for sure.
With your programming, getting ready during those years, what did a normal day look like?
Oh gosh. I mean, at the peak, my son, he was in preschool at the time. So I kind of set up my schedule so that my work at the gym, I still taught classes and stuff, but not a ton. And so I'd pretty much just kind of sleep in until I needed to recover. I'd get up, I'd take my son to preschool, I'd drop him off and go back to the gym. And I was there by roughly 9 o'clock, and I'd start training, and I would train until probably around 12 or 12:30, go home and grab a bite to eat, usually lay on the couch and wear those Normatec boots and just kind of fall asleep. I wear those, take a nap in the afternoon, and then I typically on like the higher volume portions of the year, I'd go back to the gym and train again. Sometimes do like an outdoor thing, and then or like swim type stuff, and then back home for kind of the same thing, eat and sleep and
Repeat.
repeat.
What
Yeah.
was your diet like?
You know what's funny is I was actually eating a ton of food because the training volume as it goes up, you have to kind of make up for it with calories. So
Hmm.
I would eat clean. I had a couple seasons where I tried to gain a bunch of weight. At one point, I was eating 5,000 calories a day, which is a
Damn.
tremendous amount of food.
And you're not a huge dude.
No. So, and that was keeping me around like 155, 152. So I had some seasons like that where I was really trying to bulk up. But for the most part, I would eat clean, but I would eat a lot on those really high volume training portions. I would, on the way home, stop at Cafe Rio and get like a fully loaded burrito and eat that, and then get home and then eat the dinner that my wife so graciously cooked, and then at night eat more food. There's a lot of calories still being consumed for sure.
With with your kind of CrossFit journey in general, do you have a moment that kind of sticks out to you as your greatest accomplishment?
Oh, I don't really think of it as any specific moment. For me, I was really um well prepared at the 2014 regionals, and I was really happy with my performance there. Um, but I think for me, what I think of that I really am thankful for, and I feel like was maybe different than a lot of other people, was I kind of felt, maybe I'm wrong, but I kind of felt like because I was a smaller athlete, I think I was maybe a little bit more relatable.
Hmm.
And so people kind of thought, well, gosh, like if he can do this, I can do some form of it. So I feel like there was a really cool time there where I could kind of help bridge the gap a little bit between
Hmm.
these elite competitors and the people working out in the gym every day, where it maybe makes things feel a little bit more attainable for some. Um, and so that I think is what I look at. And then even looking back, things have changed. I couldn't, even at my peak, I couldn't do what athletes are doing now as far
Yeah.
as like the weight. It's just like I'm just not that big enough and strong enough. But I do, looking back, it's pretty cool to have done what I did at the size that I am. Like
Yeah.
that's just
Totally.
it wasn't very normal.
It is very relatable. Like you see somebody like yourself, like I look at that sometimes when I look at like basketball players and stuff, you see like a Steph Curry who's not too crazy tall or like, he's not so fast and all these things. You're like, dang, like he's pretty cool. Like he's not too much bigger than me. And, he's out there playing with the guys that are 7 feet tall. And there's something
Yeah.
about that when you see somebody, it's also kind of an age thing too, which I think is cool. It's like you see, a football player like Aaron Rodgers, unfortunately, just hurt his, Achilles, but 40
Yeah.
years old, right? He's still doing it. It's like, I'm 35. Like, man, there's no excuse. Like, I can still go out there and play with the young guys.
Yeah, for sure.
With with your training, what was your favorite movement? Then also the most difficult one for you to achieve?
I generally, I excelled at body weight stuff. So anytime I saw like higher volume muscle ups or things like that, I really like squatting movements for the most part. I was kind of good at front squatting. So thrusters, things like that. I enjoyed that stuff. I struggled, even though I enjoyed them, I really struggled with heavy power cleans, like cycling them.
Mhm.
Oh gosh, I would spend a lot of time with heavy barbells. So usually anything that got like to 225 or higher was it was time for me to have to like, okay, I really have to focus on this. So that was always kind of a struggle bus for me.
When and I've heard you talk a lot too, and I think it's very accurate, and I'm very much appreciate you saying it, is the way training and programming has evolved a bit within CrossFit. When you started Park City Fit, was it just mainly to train for CrossFit?
Yeah. Yeah, it was very much that. And in its infancy, it's like early days, right, of CrossFit and training and that mentality of, the whole all the stuff you hear, constantly varied functional movements, prepared for the unknown and unknowable, da 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 da, like for
Yeah.
sure. That's what it was. Yeah.
With how did that evolve for you personally in the last few years, changing your mindset around how to train?
It's been interesting because I've had to ask myself the question of, have I change the approach because the program's not sustainable or because of an age thing? And I think all too often people fall into this mindset of it's an age thing. And I don't really believe that. When you're younger, you can get away with a lot,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like your training volume, poor movement, lack of
Sure.
sleep, all that stuff.
Recovery, yeah.
Yeah, you can get away with that. But it doesn't mean that the program's still perfect. And there is no perfect program, right? But I think that there's tremendous value to us, obviously, doing functional movements the way that CrossFit defines them. I think there's great value to having intensity. All those things are really good, but I think it has to be in the right dose.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a big fan of more of a varied intensity approach. And I also think that it's really important to think about either individuals or clients in the gym that we coach and saying, hey, some movements just might not be appropriate for you,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe you just don't ever need to do that because that's not part of what your goals are. I also
Can you
think
give an
that there's
example of that?
like a snatch, right? I think it's awesome. I actually love the movement. I
Yeah.
think it's great. I can't do them anymore because of my shoulder, but it doesn't mean it's not a valuable movement. But I
Mm-hmm.
also know that I can help people build explosive power and athleticism in a host of different ways. So if taking someone through the process of how to safely and efficiently do that lift to where they're able to do it with quite a bit of weight, which is relative, that's a journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those people have to say, hey, that's something that I'd like to do. And I find value in that. And it's appropriate for me. Well, great, let's do that. But, if I have someone walk in the gym that's 55 years old and they haven't done that before, or maybe they're 21 years old and they're a marathon runner and they just need to build a base level of strength. Well, guess what? For that marathon runner or the 55-year-old, I probably back squatting and overhead pressing and carrying, I can get a really similar response. And sure, I'll have them do some hang power cleans, some box jumps, some things to build that explosive power, but I don't have to have them snatch in
Mm-hmm.
order to do that. And so there's that. I mean, you could even say that with a lot of like the kipping movements. I think again, great. They're great, but in the right context with people that have the base level of strength. So just saying to ourselves, okay, what what can we do to set people up for success, like short and long term?
Yeah.
Instead of just saying, well, in this training program, we do kipping because it creates higher power output. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, then it feels like I have to eventually get there. But I could have someone do movements that are strict the entire duration of their training
Mm-hmm.
lifespan and still be incredibly fit, right? Like just because I have someone doing strict pull-ups instead of kipping pull-ups, or
Totally.
never do a handstand push-up and they're doing a kettlebell press, we're still going to accomplish the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just think that there is a far broader way to approach these things, and not saying that this is right or wrong or this is the best. Anytime I hear people talk like that, like, hey, this is the best way to approach it, I'm like, well, fool, for who?
Yeah, for who?
You know, I
Definitely.
start to like, yeah, already kind of red flag pops up to me because I'm like, well, maybe for one person, but not
Yeah.
the next. So I think there's so much to be learned there. There's so much room to grow, and there's so much potential for our community to say, hey, what can we do to make this a truly sustainable program
Hmm.
that grows with people and that doesn't have them kind of fall trap to that it has to be high intensity all the time, or it has to be competitive, or I have to do these movements in order to feel like a part of the community
Hmm.
or the gym. That's just not the environment that I want to have. And so, man, it's a long answer. I apologize, Sam.
No,
It's
I
like
think it's great.
I like the one of the things that we try to say at Park City Fit, and just sort of this like ethos, is all are welcome to the table.
Hmm.
Everybody, like if they want to be here, I want them to be here. But that also means that I need to listen to them and find out what their goals are, what they want to accomplish, what have they tried that hasn't worked before, and how can I help get them there. And for some people, that's not high intensity couplets and triplets 7 days a week.
Yeah, totally. I
It's
heard
just
you
not the
say,
recipe.
like, don't do something today that won't bring you back tomorrow,
Yeah. Yeah.
which I think is a great point, you know?
A buddy of mine, Spencer, said that. And that's like, I think it speaks, yeah, incredibly well to a broad way of looking at what we're
Hmm.
talking about now.
What do you think are some of the things that make any programming not sustainable for the long term?
I think definitely like intensity every day. That's probably one it's hard for, I think, younger athletes to hear because they can kind of handle it. But my encouragement would be, if you did have a more varied intensity approach, I think it would naturally create a more well-rounded athlete. And the days that you can push, you'd probably be able
Hmm.
to push harder. So I think a varied intensity approach, I do think there's real value almost for any athlete to have kind of a structured lifting program, to where, yes, strength is a part of it. And there can be great value to variance through that. We've done that a lot here at Park City Fit, where, we just kind of look at what we've done in the weeks past. But, there's also, in my experience, if you give people consistency with things,
Hmm.
then it works really, really well. So if we're back squatting 3 weeks in a row and then we change that to a front squat 3 weeks in a row and like some accessory work, it
Hmm.
just works really well. So I think that's a staple of a really good program. Doesn't have to always be like that. And then I also think, like, having people, two elements to this where I think you could do it two different ways. Having people go long. And for us in a CrossFit class, that's going to be like 20 or 30, maybe 40-minute workout.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's great. But like, what if we have also, and a part of this that I'm hugely passionate about is like, what if that go long is time outside the gym, where, you're going for a hike, or you're
Yeah.
going for a ski tour, or you go ride dirt bikes with your buddies for 4 hours, or you're on the mountain bike ride.
Hmm.
I think that what we do, we fall trap to this concept that as long as my numbers in the gym are improving, because this is
Hmm.
what we're kind of taught within the CrossFit world, right? As times are decreasing, my loads are increasing, my reps are increasing, then the program's working.
Yeah.
And that's true to a certain point, right? But for all of us, it doesn't matter who, it's coming. Like, that's not going to go up.
Yeah, totally.
And it doesn't mean the program's not effective, right? Because for all of us, at some point, we're going to find this place where we sort of plateau, or we're trying to hang on for as long as we can. And that can be coming at different times of life. But where you're not limited by that is experiences outside the gym. So this concept that fitness inside the gym, like, that's, to me, in this chapter of my life, which is far different than where I was, it's kind of useless if I'm not expressing that outside the gym.
Hmm.
Like, I've
I
got
have to
all
have
this,
that. Yeah.
Yeah, like I've got all this capacity, right? And all this ability inside the gym, but I'm never using it. And so I think we kind of fall trapped to being really good at CrossFit
Hmm.
and not very good at life.
Yeah,
And
right. There's a difference in training. If you're
yeah,
training to be at CrossFit or are you training for life and longevity?
exactly. And we talk about that. And I think CrossFit tries to talk about that. And they try to say, well, hey, like this is going to give you a higher quality of life. And like the needs of our athletes don't vary by kind, but by degree. And like there are these catchphrases, but at the end of the day, I feel like people don't really implement that because that hasn't been in the past, at least, that hasn't been the culture or the ethos. And I don't think that's anybody's fault. I just think that that was kind of the progression. We saw that freight train of competition come in, and it's just such a different planet. It's a different form of training, even though some of the principles are the same. It's a way different demand. It's a way different lifestyle, but people are drawn to that because it's what they're familiar with in the gym.
Hmm?
What they're not familiar with is like most people aren't familiar or even comfortable with saying to themselves, hey, Sam, what if we went and tried to run a marathon? It's like that for some people, they would be like, there's no way I'm going to do that because I'll take 30 pounds off my back squat.
Yeah, totally.
But what if we did it just to experience it? And so what if our back squat drops? But like, what if we just had this awesome experience and then, yeah, we'll go back squat again when we're done
Hmm.
the run. Like, but people are so caught, and I fall victim to this too. We're
Sure, I
so
do too.
caught into that, like, if I'm not progressing in the gym, then I'm not progressing.
Hmm.
But like, there's way more, there's endless progression outside through adventure, activities, sport, all that stuff, where your time in the gym, it's just limited. Like your
Yeah,
progression will be, it stalls, it's going to stall someday.
I look at it too for like a mental standpoint, like that time outside of my normal gym or my normal routine. I mean, I'll get done playing soccer and it'll be, pretty light session and we're just having fun, but I feel so good because I was outside doing something different and it's really good for my mind to when I
Yes.
get back in the gym the next day. I just feel more free and more available to do more.
Yeah. And I think it's because we're expressing it. You sort of connect the dots of the value.
Hmm.
And when you hear people say that, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I'm doing this. I'm so glad I'm training. So it gives you reason to show up day after day. But if your reason to show up day after day is to like take 3 seconds off Fran next time you see it come up, you're going to be a head case, man.
Yeah, totally. What for you, I know you're in a different stage of life. You got two, I think two boys, right?
One boy, one girl. Yeah.
One boy, one girl. They're getting into those teenage years.
Yeah.
How do you structure your week?
Well, that's a great question, man. I actually just recently kind of had like this defining moment this past spring with a conversation with a guy that I know, and we were talking about things that we're trying to work toward in business. And I think we've got it all kind of backwards. We try to work super hard and bust our tails so we can retire at 65, but then I missed everything.
Hmm.
And I was
Totally.
like, I really want to try to create a 20-hour work week. And it's terrifying to say. And I also feel guilty for saying it, which is really weird, right?
Hmm.
But
People are gonna be like, "How's he gonna do that? What does he mean?"
right. Or like, oh, you don't work as hard as me. That's like the what I'm thinking, right? But I was thinking about it and I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna do it. And this guy was just like, why don't you just try it? And I was thinking, well, that's a great point. Because if it doesn't work, I'll just go back to working 15, 60-hour weeks.
Yeah, totally.
So I wrote this list out of all these things that I was responsible for. And I realized that a lot of them were doing nothing to progress the business, but just keep it moving.
Hmm.
So I met with all the trainers and I said, hey, guys, if anybody's interested, I'm going to be delegating these and I'll either hire out for these or if you guys are interested, you can take them. And they've been great. We looked at them and split them up and things that they were all interested in doing. And I'm definitely not at a 20-hour work week, but some weeks I might be close.
Yeah.
And other weeks I might be a little bit more, or closer to 40 hours, but it's not a 50 or 60-hour week anymore. And I really try hard to be there for my kids when they are getting up. One day a week, I'm not, because I've got to teach the early morning classes and I've got some one-on-one stuff that I have to do. But for the most part, I try hard to be there when they go on the bus.
Hmm.
I try hard to be there when they get off the bus. Um, and I'm trying really hard to be more present with them. So yeah, I mean, I'm at that point where I'm trying to work no more than 5 hours a day, knowing that that will mean that the online side of my business isn't going to be on turbo boosters, and being okay with that,
Yeah,
saying, hey,
totally.
I would rather take the risk of not having a wildly successful online business, but having time and experiences with my family while they're young, than really working as hard as I can to hope to
Hmm.
create that and missing everything. So
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of work, still work hard. But also try to get a lot of time with the family. I still train with the class almost every day. I ride my bike, yeah, probably 3 days a week. I try to ski twice a week. Um, yeah, trying to do life right.
Yeah. I
I don't
mean,
know if that's right, but
no,
that's what
dude,
I'm trying.
me and my wife have talked a lot about this. Like, one of our biggest fears would be we'd wake up at 60 years old and realize, we haven't, like, what did we do in the past 30 years? Like,
Yeah,
have we missed out on these experiences? Like, have we not taken enough trips? Have we not seen enough of the world? Have we, all these things that, like, you kind of set out as a young person is that you want to do. And then you kind of get in the workforce and you get into the grind and you kind of
yeah,
just get caught in the rat race. And you're going to wake up one day and realize, in my eyes, you wasted so many prime years of your life that, you could have been exploring, you could have been experiencing new things. I love experiences, meeting new people and traveling and all that sort of stuff. With your wife, when did you meet your wife?
oh man, Sarah and I met actually a Young Life camp in 1999. We were
Oh,
teaching
nice.
we were both working at Saranac up in upstate New York. And yeah, met her there, and like long story short, we kind of went our separate ways back to school and stuff. And about 5 years later, she reached out and I was living out here. She came out to visit for spring break and then for summer and never went home.
Very cool. When did y'all have your first kid?
2010. Yeah. So that was crazy because that was kind of game stuff as well. So I had uh yeah, I had a newborn pretty much at the 2010 CrossFit Games, and then we had our second in 2012. So from the time 2010 to 2014, we were toting around anywhere from a newborn to a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old at competitions.
with um with uh with them and their sports and their kind of athletic and outdoors life, what do you kind of like push them to do, or do you push them at all, or what are they getting into?
That's probably one of the hardest things I've found as a parent, because I grew up different, and also my personality is different. I grew up where when you sign up for something, you do it. There's no excuse. You go to every practice, you see it through to the end. And so like I really had that sort of ingrained in me. And then wrestling creates this just crazy work ethic that's just, in my opinion, like far exceeds any other sport. It's like so demanding. Um, so my son loves to mountain bike. And like the world's at his fingertips here with what he has access to. My daughter enjoys figure skating. My son, school is really hard for him. And so the bike is a great outlet for him. And what I've found is that I have to really temper that tendency to want to push him
Mm-hmm.
to be super consistent and be your best. And you can like do whatever you set out to do, but it takes time and dedication and effort, da da da. Because for him, just showing up for school is really hard. So I can't push really hard on other
Mm-hmm.
things because he'll just get overwhelmed.
Sure.
So the bike is an outlet for him. And it's not something where, and he's even said there, he'll go through these moments where like, just like every kid, he's 13 and I'll be like, Dad, I want to race in the World Cup. And I'll be like, bro, you can do it. Like if you put your mind to it, like you work hard, you can do it. And then there are other days where he's like, Dad, I don't think I want to do any of that stuff. I just want to ride for fun. And every part of my being is like, dude, you can race in the World Cup. And I have to take a step back as a dad and say, like, hey man, that's super cool. Like
Hmm.
you can ride your bike any way you want. And my daughter, she's super confident. She likes school. And she doesn't really need other things to feel good about herself. So she just kind of floats around and she just like tries this and tries that. And like none of it's really that important to her because I don't think she finds like her identity in it.
Hmm.
So that I try to really hard to just let it be my kid's experience. It's not mine, it's my kid's experience, and then facilitate like adventure. What's that
Hmm.
look like? Trips with them, getting them uncomfortable in some situations that are maybe like a little scary or nerve-wracking. I love giving them some semblance of that adventure
Hmm.
where things are harder, a little bit nervous sometimes. Not all the time, but like, yeah, a lot of times hard things are really rewarding.
Sure. And they can feel that accomplishment too on the other side. And I think it's a great point. Your son loving the bike. I mean, the outlet of something like that and for all of us is, I think my dad's doing a ton of hiking. He retired probably 2 years ago. He absolutely loves it, and I think it's just his outlet. He gets out there and feels free, and that's something I feel like we all need to find in ourselves. With with living in Park City, obviously you have a hot and active summer, but also a very
Yeah.
cold and active winter. Which one do you prefer?
Oh man, I used to be like I would say winter through and through because I love skiing powder. Like there's very few things, but I'm gonna sound like a crabby local, but things have definitely changed. Like since Vail has come in and the influx of people and like it's just it's made skiing harder and it's the places I'd like to ski, it's more expensive or it's more time consuming to get out into
Hmm.
the backcountry. Um, so as much as I love skiing, I have in the past probably 3, 4 years, like I love mountain biking and dirt biking.
Hmm.
So if someone had to force me to choose, I would say summer. Like summer in the mountains is just absolutely bonkers. It's so fun. It's so
Yeah,
good.
probably
Yeah,
so beautiful too.
it is. Yeah, no complaints. That's for sure.
With I heard you talk about and that they potentially might be doing this, but adding some sort of athleticism programming into the CrossFit games, not just like how many times can you lift this weight or how many times can you do this rep sort of thing, but doing some more like agility type work, which I think is really cool. And I've had this talk with my sister who loves CrossFit, and we talk about like what is fitness and what is athleticism. I think they're
Yeah,
different in a way. Do
I
you
I
see? Yeah,
agree.
do you see them adding more of that into it?
It's like it's tough because I think that when you're trying to create a test that's measurable, it's really hard to test athleticism
Hmm.
because I think that's often expressed in more like true sport, where there's way too many variables to test that,
Hmm.
right? Um, like how would you test that at the CrossFit Games? How do you really test athleticism? What event? And then when you start to think about, well, what would I do and how would I program that? Then what you run into is like you could easily make people look really silly because what they're really
Totally.
good at is like lifting barbells, doing it quickly, muscle ups, running, picking up objects. But like if I said, okay, I want to test your athleticism by having you guys get on a bike and go on a pump track,
Hmm.
there are 4 year olds in Park City that would run circles around them, you know? The closest thing I think we saw to that, honestly, was the obstacle course in Pendleton in 2011 or
Hmm.
12. That's like probably the closest test of athleticism that I've seen. So I think that's the only way that they could do it and not have it look silly because otherwise, and this is not a knock, I just think it's an observation. What I think you run into sometimes is the intent to create that, but then sort of things get sort of like, what's the word? Maybe like circusy or like they
Yeah,
just get
totally.
a little weird, you
Hmm.
know? And it feels kind of foreign. from what we know, but also you're like, wait, this person's like a monster, but they can't do this one simple thing.
Yeah, like the
So
agility and coordination, hand-eye
yeah.
coordination type stuff.
So how do you test that? I mean, I think you could test it in more like team events, or
Hmm.
I mean, you could. I think it'd be awesome. Like you could have them wrestle.
Oh man. That would be wild. Oh, I mean, but honestly, it is really funny. I mean, not funny, but you can see somebody super fit, and then you could put like a golf club in their hand, or you could
Yes,
tell them to throw a football or maybe hit a baseball, and it's just like they have no chance at doing it. So it's just
totally.
a crazy balance to see sometimes. And you see it in all sports. I've seen like some of the best, cornerbacks in the NFL, try and shoot a basketball or try and kick a soccer
Yeah,
ball or something. Like it just looks so foreign to them. So it would be kind of interesting to see some of that if you could throw it in, but it's also very hard. Like you said, like, what are you going to do?
yeah. I just don't know, and I think they try to lean on that a little bit, but it's a hard balance because just like you said, if you're thinking about someone is at the CrossFit Games, they're the best in the world at CrossFit. That's
Mm-hmm.
what they do. And by nature, it doesn't matter that people are like, oh, they're the most well-rounded athlete. They're not. They're the best at CrossFit. And so, like, just like you said, I mean, I was guilty of it too in 2011, throwing the softball. I was like, I didn't grow up throwing baseballs and softball. It looked like a goofball out
Yeah,
there, you
totally.
know? So, like, eventually you get a specialist outside of their comfort zone.
Mhm.
They're going to look a little goofy, man. Doesn't matter
Yeah.
what they do.
And growing up, I always like really admired the guys that or the girls that could do kind of any sport. Like you would kind of throw them in the sport and they could pick it up really quick and
Yeah,
achieve be a contributing teammate in whatever it was. I always thought that was like very admirable. And I thought those like,
totally.
dang, those are the best athletes.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And that's different than the biggest workhorse.
Yeah, yeah, without a doubt. What do y'all have coming up? Do y'all have any future plans or anything y'all have with you and the family,
Business
you and the
wise or
gym?
family wise?
Yeah, both.
So business wise, I'm really trying to, I'd love to try to have some seminars and stuff at Park City Fit that help people learn how to self-regulate, help people learn how to assess programming because, it's no program's perfect, like we said before. So I want to teach people how to look at the workouts that they might be doing in the garage or in the gym and say, hey, like how do I take this and look at how I feel today and make good sound decisions on customizing this for me. I think the word scaling's kind of dumb, to be honest. I really dislike it because then it puts us in this category of, well, this is the right way and this is the less right way. Um, which I just think, like we talked about, if we're doing the thing that gives us results and keeps us coming back in consistently, that's what we need to do. That's the right way to do
Mhm.
it. So I'd love to start to kind of host some of those and have them in small group type stuff. Actually have a gal coming in this weekend with a couple people, and they're going to be doing that. They get in tomorrow, and we're going to be doing exactly that, teaching them how to self-assess, giving them a class here at Park City Fit so they can see what that looks like in application. Talk through ways to start to redefine what it looks like for their training and how to get over that speed bump of not having to have constant progression and comparing ourselves to previous versions. And then on Saturday, we're going to get on the mountain bike and experience that outside the gym and show them, hey, well, this is one of the ways that we do that and give them that exposure toward progression in sport outside the gym. So that's stuff that I really want to do in the gym. As far as like for the broader community on the business side of things. So that's a big one. And then as far as like the family, we've got a desert trip coming up at the end of October. My son's going to be riding bikes down at the desert at the old Rampage site, which is really cool because kids get to ride. If you guys aren't familiar, look it up. Red Bull Rampage. It's
Oh,
ridiculous.
nice. I think I've
Yeah,
seen them on YouTube. Yeah, those videos on YouTube.
yeah, it's crazy. And the kids get to ride like an older site, which is much more toned down, but still
They're not
pretty
jumping off of
pretty
rocks
crazy.
and stuff yet.
Yeah, like still doing it, but not at the size that other guys are. But we'll be down there for that. And then I'm trying to organize what I'd love to do with a buddy of mine is kind of like an adventure moto trip where we can go hopefully in the winter because I think I'm going to be tapped out in like February with the snow. But I'm going to try to program or organize something where we go to a southern route and we rent some adventure bikes. So they're kind of like a cross between a dirt bike and a touring bike. And essentially, like there's different routes that you can take, and hopefully we'll be able to set something up where it's like a 4 or 5 day trip, and you basically just ride on these dirt bikes, mix between off road and on road, and you kind of camp along the way. So that's kind of on the radar for this winter. Yeah, those are kind of like I guess
You
the
got a
big
yeah, busy schedule ahead, but like you said, you're balancing that work in life. I think is so important for people, and I mean, headed in the right direction. Maybe not there at 20 hours yet,
Yep.
but I mean, I think that's an incredible goal too, and time with your family and kids and all that stuff that I think needs to be a priority that sometimes people forget.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Trying.
Yeah. Well, Chris, man, thank you so much for joining me. I've had a pleasure of following you through your career here and there. My sister and my parents both really got into CrossFit early on in the late 2010s, 2000, I think it was like 2008, 2009. I introduced my
Yeah.
sister to it and she went full all in. But it's cool, she's training for a marathon now. Um,
Awesome.
they've actually, changed some of the programming at their gym in a way where it's more for like longevity and
Yeah.
sustainability and all that sort of stuff. So I really appreciate your mindset and your outlook on all that. And thank you for joining me. And I know you got some snow coming up, so maybe enjoy your last few days of mountain biking. But